Story 1. The whisper of the wind through the pines had always been my church, the scent of damp earth and pine needles my incense. For years I'd sought solace in the untamed wild, each new trail a challenge, a meditation. My backpack was an extension of myself, my boots familiar friends. But a few months ago, I heard about the Blackwood Pass Trail, a legend among the hardcore, a whispered cautionary tale among the less adventurous. It was notoriously remote, unmaintained, rumored to lead to forgotten logging camps, and reportedly, to places where the map ended, literally. It called to me. I set out on a Tuesday morning, the kind of crisp autumn day that fools you into thinking everything is benign. The sky was an impossible blue, the air sharp and clean. I parked my old Tacoma at the trailhead, a barely there dirt track off an even less maintained forest road. No other cars. Perfect. My kind of solitude. The first few miles were glorious. Sunlight dappled through the canopy, birds chirped, and the rush of a distant stream filled the air. I hummed an old tune, my stride strong and confident. This was why I lived, why I pushed myself. Then, slowly, subtly, things began to shift. The bird's song faded, replaced by an unnerving quiet. Not the peaceful quiet of deep woods, but a heavy, watchful silence. The trees grew denser, their branches interlocking overhead, turning the path into a perpetual twilight tunnel. The air, despite the lingering sun, grew colder, carrying a faint, earthy smell I couldn't quite place, something sweet and cloying, like decaying fruit mixed with damp fur. I checked my GPS. Signal patchy, which wasn't unusual for this kind of remote area, but the map on my device seemed to glitch, showing my position hovering just off the marked trail. I laughed it off. Old tech, deep woods. Then I saw it. High up on a gnarled oak branch, tied with a frayed piece of twine, swayed a single worn child's shoe. A small blue sneaker, scuffed and mud-stained, disproportionately small against the massive tree. It was placed too deliberately, too high for it to have simply fallen off. My breath caught. My first thought was a lost child, but the years of weathering on the shoe suggested it had been there a long, long time, and no search party would have left it. A prickle of unease started to spread beneath my skin. I tried to shake it off. A strange prank, perhaps. A lost and found that nobody ever found. But the image of that tiny, solitary shoe clung to the edges of my vision. The trail became less defined, swallowed by encroaching ferns and thorny bushes. I pushed through, determined. This was the challenge I craved. But the feeling of being watched solidified, a constant, chilling presence at my back. I kept glancing over my shoulder, seeing only the impenetrable wall of trees. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drum against the sudden, absolute silence of the forest. I started to hear things. Faint whispers, carried on a breeze that didn't stir the leaves. The rustle of dry leaves that sounded too heavy for a squirrel, too deliberate for the wind. And once, a sound like a wet gasp, close by, just out of sight. I froze, straining my ears, but it vanished, leaving only the deafening quiet. Panic, cold and sharp, began to claw at my throat. My rational mind screamed that I was dehydrated, hallucinating, spooking myself. But my gut, that primal instinct that kept my ancestors alive, screamed a different truth. Get out. I tried to turn back, but the path behind me seemed to have vanished, or become indistinguishable from the surrounding wilderness. The trees looked different. Menacing. Each one seemed to twist into a grotesque, observing face. My compass spun erratically. My GPS was now completely dead. I was lost. Truly, terrifyingly lost. Then I stumbled upon it. It wasn't on any map. Didn't look like any official structure. A crude, lean-to shelter, cobbled together from fallen logs and stretched tarps, nestled deep within a hollow. It looked ancient, decrepit, barely standing. A thin wisp of smoke curled lazily from a makeshift chimney. against my better judgment, against every fiber of my being that screamed run, curiosity, or perhaps a desperate need for answers, pulled me forward. The air around it was heavy, thick with that cloying, sickly sweet odor, now mixed with something else. Decay, ash, and a metallic tang that made my stomach churn. I approached cautiously, my hunting knife clutched in a sweaty hand. Through a gap in the tarp, I peered inside. It was dark, almost pitch black, but my eyes adjusted. There was a crude fire pit in the center, embers glowing faintly, and around it, on the dirt walls, were drawings. Childlike, yet profoundly disturbing. Stick figures with too many limbs, faces contorted in agony, symbols I didn't recognize but felt instinctively were wrong. Then my gaze fell on the collection. Hung from branches, laid out on a rough-hewn table were things. A cluster of tarnished wedding rings, a dozen or so driver's licenses, faded pictures staring out with hollow eyes, a leather wallet, its contents scattered, a credit card, a family photo, a neatly folded flannel shirt, and among them, nestled carefully, a worn child's teddy bear. Its single remaining button eye seemed to bore into me. These were trophies, the belongings of the lost. A chill, deeper than anything the autumn air could conjure, settled in my bones. I felt a profound sense of violation, a dreadful understanding. This wasn't some lost hiker's shelter. This was a lair. And then I heard it. A guttural breath, wet and ragged from behind the shelter. It wasn't human. It wasn't animal. It was something else. My blood ran cold, solidifying in my veins. The sweet, cloying smell intensified, now overpoweringly sickening. I didn't think. I just ran. I burst from the hollow, scrambling over roots and rocks, not caring where I was going, only away. Behind me, I heard a heavy, dragging sound, fast and relentless. A choked, rasping laugh echoed through the trees, chilling my very soul. It was hunting me. I plunged deeper into the woods, branches tearing at my clothes, thorns raking my skin. My lungs burned, my legs screamed, but there was no stopping. The sounds were closer now, the heavy thud of footsteps, the slithering drag, the wet, ragged breathing right behind my ear. I could feel its hot, foul breath on my neck. I risked a glance back. Tall, impossibly gaunt, a shadow among shadows, it moved with a horrifying, disjointed grace. Its limbs seemed too long, too thin, its head a dark, featureless mass against the deeper gloom of the forest. It wasn't merely chasing me, it was toying with me. I screamed then, a raw, primal sound ripped from my very core. I stumbled, fell, scrambling to my feet, my mind screaming with a terror so absolute it threatened to shatter me. Just as I thought it would overtake me, I saw a sliver of light, not natural sunlight, but the harsh, artificial glow of something else. Hope, hot and desperate, surged through me. I burst through a thicket of thorny bushes, tearing my clothes and skin, and stumbled onto a paved road. Black asphalt, a yellow line, civilization. My lungs burned, my legs gave out, and I crumpled onto the broken shoulder, gasping, shaking, sobbing. A car approached, its headlights blinding in the deepening twilight. The driver, an elderly woman in a beat-up sedan, slammed on her brakes, her face a mask of shock. I must have looked like a wild animal, covered in mud, blood, and leaves, my eyes wide with a terror that refused to subside. She called for help. The police, paramedics, they all came. They listened to my hysterical account, their faces polite but incredulous. They searched the general area, of course, but found nothing. No crude shelter, no trophies, no strange entity. Only dense, impenetrable woods. They attributed it to dehydration, exhaustion, maybe some kind of panic-induced hallucination. But I know what I saw. I know what chased me. Now, months later, I am not the same. The woods, once my sanctuary, are now a source of unrelenting dread. The silence is no longer peaceful. It is watchful, waiting. Every shadow holds a menace. I jump at every rustle of leaves, every creak of the floorboards. I tried to go back once, drawn by a morbid curiosity, a need to confront it, to prove it was real. But I couldn't find the trail, not even the old dirt track. It was as if the forest itself had swallowed it whole, erased any trace of its horrors. Sometimes, when the wind blows just right, I catch a faint, sweet, cloying scent. The smell of decay and damp fur, mixed with that metallic tang. And sometimes, late at night, when the house is still and silent, I hear it. A slow, heavy scrape drag from somewhere beyond the walls, followed by a wet, ragged breath. I sleep with the lights on now, and the doors locked. But I know it's not the doors keeping it out. It's just waiting. And I know, with a chilling certainty, that it remembers me, and it knows where I live. Story 2. The air was crisp, the kind that promised a good hike and a clear head. October had painted Blackwood Ridge in a riot of rust and gold. But today, a thick, bruised purple sky loomed, muting the colors to a somber palette. I'd chosen this trail for its solitude, the promise of quiet communion with nature, a balm for the city's constant clamor. The crunch of fallen leaves underfoot was the only sound for the first hour, a comforting rhythm. But that was before I took the turn. It wasn't a marked path, just a slightly less dense section of undergrowth, a ghost of a trail barely visible beneath the decaying leaves. Curiosity, that ancient curse, tugged at me. The main path, while beautiful, felt overtrodden today, somehow too cheerful for my mood. This deviation promised deeper woods, true isolation. The moment I stepped off the main trail, the temperature dropped. Not by much, but enough for a shiver that had nothing to do with the wind. The vibrant autumn colors faded, replaced by skeletal branches and an oppressive green moss that clung to everything. The air grew heavy, damp, carrying a faint, earthy smell that was wrong. Like wet soil mixed with something metallic and sickly sweet, a scent that prickled the back of my throat. The silence here was different. Not the peaceful quiet of nature, but an absolute suffocating void. No birds chirped, no squirrels chattered. The rustle of my own jacket sounded like a gunshot. My boots, so loud moments ago, now seemed to sink into the leaves with a muffled thud, as if the ground itself was absorbing the sound. Then I saw the first marker. Not a conventional trail marker, but a crude carving etched deep into the bark of an ancient oak. It looked like a distorted human eye, weeping black tears, surrounded by a series of jagged, interlocking lines that made no sense. A chill snaked up my spine. This wasn't local graffiti. It felt ancient, deliberate. A warning or an invitation? I walked on, drawn by a morbid fascination I couldn't articulate. More carvings appeared, sometimes on trees, sometimes on smooth gray rocks. They grew more intricate, more disturbing. Figures with elongated limbs, heads twisted at unnatural angles, all seemingly in various states of agony or worship. I tried to convince myself it was some peculiar local art project, but the dread building in my gut told a different story. The whispers began subtly, caught on the edge of the breeze that wasn't there. Faint, guttural murmurs, too deep for human, too distorted to understand. They seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, a constant low thrum beneath the silence. My heart hammered against my ribs. I picked up my pace, a frantic need to escape this suffocating pocket of the woods overriding my ill-advised curiosity. Then I stumbled, not over a root, but something soft, yielding. My stomach lurched as I looked down. It was a makeshift cairn, but instead of simple stones, crude stick figures had been woven into the structure, their limbs snapped and arranged. And at its base, half buried in the damp leaves, sat a child's red mitten, faded and stained with what looked suspiciously like dried mud, or something darker. A single unsettling detail that fractured my sanity. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. They coalesced into a sound that was almost a word, a drawn-out wet hiss that seemed to vibrate through the very air. I felt a prickling sensation on the back of my neck, the undeniable certainty of being watched. Every shadow seemed to deepen, to twist into a grotesque mockery of human form. I squeezed my eyes shut for a second, then opened them, convinced it was just my imagination. A branch snapped directly behind me. Close. Too close. I didn't look back. I just ran. My lungs burned, my legs screamed, but the terror propelling me forward was a far more potent force. The whispers became a chorus, a horrifying symphony of wet, gasping breaths and indecipherable guttural pleas. I could hear it now, behind me, a rapid, uneven thump-drag sound, as if something heavy and malformed was in pursuit. I risked a glance over my shoulder. Through the blur of trees, I saw it, tall, gaunt, its form indistinct within the deepening gloom, but its movements were utterly unnatural, too fluid, too fast, a sickening undulation that defied human anatomy. Its head was tilted, seemingly too far to one side, and two pinpricks of light, either reflected or self-luminous, glowed faintly from where eyes should be. The sickly sweet metallic smell was overpowering now, filling my nostrils, making me gag. I tripped again, this time my ankle twisting beneath me with a sickening crunch. A sharp cry tore from my throat. I scrambled, desperately trying to push myself up, but the pain was immense. The whispers were right on top of me now, a frantic, slobbering cacophony that assaulted my ears. A shadow fell over me, cold and absolute. Then, from the darkness just behind the tree line, a hand emerged. Long, unnaturally pale fingers, tipped with jagged, blackened nails, reached out. It wasn't human. It was too long, too skeletal, the joints distended. It moved slowly, deliberately, towards my face, as if to cup my cheek. Pure, unadulterated primal fear ripped through me. I kicked out with my good leg, a desperate, flailing strike, and scrambled backwards, ignoring the searing pain in my ankle. Adrenaline surged, burning away the agony. I managed to push myself to my feet and stumbled blindly through the undergrowth, crashing through branches, not daring to look back, not daring to stop. The wet, gasping sounds, the sickening thump-drag of pursuit, slowly faded behind me. I didn't stop until I burst out of the tree line onto a gravel road I vaguely recognized, far from where I'd started. The bruised purple sky had deepened to an inky black. I collapsed, gasping, shaking, the cold night air a shock against my sweat-soaked skin. The rangers found me hours later, huddled by the side of the road, my ankle swollen to twice its size, babbling incoherently about whispers and twisted figures. They dismissed it as shock, a bad fall, a fever dream brought on by pain. They found no strange carvings, no unsettling cairns, no child's mitten, just a normal, albeit remote stretch of Blackwood Ridge. But I know what I saw. I know what I heard. And sometimes, in the darkest hours before dawn, when the house is silent and the wind howls like a hungry beast, I hear a faint, wet gasp outside my window, and I know it remembers.